Okay, in this interview, we're going to be talking about the financial system. We're going to be talking about precious metals and lots of exciting things. Just had a fantastic conversation off air with Steve Penny on Twitter. He is the Silver Chartist, and I think one of the best accounts out there for macroeconomics, the financial system, and most specifically precious metals and mining stocks. Steve also has a fantastic online newsletter, and I think one of the great guys in the industry. So it's in the link right there down below that you'll see in the description, so you could go ahead and check that out. So without further ado, hit the like button on either side and welcome Steve.
Hey Jake, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. We just had such a good conversation off air, so I'm actually feeling pretty energized right now.
Yeah, likewise.
So Steve, why don't you tell me what you think right now about what's going on in the world and how this correlates with what you're more known for, which is precious metals. So what do you think about what's going on? We've had metals consolidating for the last 4 months or so, driving people crazy. We've had a election that is very much not settled, and we still have not had stimulus. We have certain states going back into lockdowns. One of them happens to be the imaginary borders that you're within. And so what's your thoughts on what's going on?
Well, I could go a lot of places with that question, but to be honest with you, it's sad. I mean, every place I go, we are going to be on the receiving end of a great wealth transfer, the people who are positioned right. But, there's a lot. I just look around at small businesses. How many of these businesses are going to be able to sustain themselves for much longer if these lockdowns persist? I'm in the state of New Mexico. We just went back on lockdown. I was in a shopping center yesterday, and I just looked around at all the businesses, and I thought, how many of these businesses will be here in a few months? How many people risked, their hard-earned savings to invest into a small business? They put everything into it, and maybe they have children and families to support. So, I look at that aspect, and it's very sad. But, the best thing that we can do, we all have a sphere of influence, right? And unfortunately, it does not extend to Washington. It doesn't extend to governments. They don't care what we think. But we do have a sphere of influence. And what we can do is position ourselves to be a blessing to others as all of this unfolds. And, hopefully be a light in a dark world around us as all of this unfolds. And it's not pleasant, but the best thing we can do is position ourselves accordingly.
Yeah, well said. So let me ask you, for those that don't know, you were in the Navy, you're also a pilot, and you've been studying precious metals for the last 15 years. What led you from being in the Navy and being a serviceman and being a pilot to now this investor that's talking about precious metals, and what led you to that journey?
Well, I think you and I probably have a lot in common in that when we find something that really interests us, you just dig and you go deeper and deeper. So that started for me about 15 years ago. I picked up a couple of books on how the economic system actually works. One of them was called The Creature from Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffin. And once you read a book like that, there's no going back. Your paradigm has shifted, and you see the way the monetary system actually works and the way the world works. And then from there, I was just hooked. You start reading one book after another, and then before you know it, you know more than a lot of people who went to college to learn these kind of things. And so that's how it started for me 15 years ago. And all the things I've been looking at are now coming to fruition. This debt-based monetary system is in its final stages. How much longer it goes, I don't know, but I think we're much closer to the end than the beginning.
That's a good way to describe it. We're closer to the end than the beginning. So let me ask you, what were the breadcrumbs, so to speak, when you said you read that book and then you said you read another one? And what were these principles that you said that you learned about are coming to fruition now? What are these general things or themes that have brought you to metals ultimately, but that you originally discovered when you were reading such books?
Well, I guess one way to answer that is that, here's one of the big things I learned, that if many people understood this one thing, It would change their paradigm on how the economic system works. Governments have nothing to give you. They have nothing to give you. They can only take from one person and give to another. And a lot of people think like the government can just give stuff to you. When you learn that, how it works and that how wealth is really created, it changes your perspective. And that was a big eye opener for me. I grew up in a probably lower middle class family where we weren't educated on these kind of things. So we look to the government. We want more from the government. And reading these books and having my eyes open to how the system works, has changed my perspective.
So when you say debt-based monetary system, that's closer to the end than the beginning. What do you feel when you are looking at what's happening? What do you anticipate happening in 2021? What are Steve's 2021 predictions if he was put on the spot?
Yeah, and I'll elaborate just a little bit on that statement when I said we're closer to the end than the beginning. That can be taken a lot of different ways, and I don't mean to sound all doom and gloom with that. So the global monetary system is reordered every 30 to 50 years. So in 1933, they confiscated gold. 1944, we had the Bretton Woods system that made the dollar the U.S. reserve currency or the world reserve currency. And then, roughly 30 years later, Nixon took us off of the gold standards. That's another revamping of the world monetary system. And now we're 50 years later. So there's going to be a new system. That's going to happen. Now, it doesn't have to be as dramatic as people think. It doesn't mean we're going down to the store with our silver coins to get bread. But there is a new system coming. And the point, here's the point where it cannot go further than we're heading to a point where all of the interest payments on the debt, where all of the federal tax receipts, all of the government's tax revenue goes towards servicing interest on the debt. That point is coming. So the two variables in that equation are, one, interest rates. If interest rates go up, we'll meet that point much sooner. Obviously, we'll arrive at that point. And then the second is confidence. Obviously, confidence in the currency will fail before that point is reached. So those are two variables we don't know. But, we are approaching that point. And I think, maybe within a couple of years, there's going to be a new system, probably sooner.
So before we get into what you just said, within a few years, a new system, but probably sooner, what that means, what do you think happens in 2021? Let's say that, so the electoral voting is December 14th. And it's pretty clear that whoever ends up being sworn in January, to me, it seems pretty clear that either way, we're going to see it go down to December 14th. I don't think either one is going to concede. And so let's say that there's a resolution then, and it's coming to January, and there is a new or there's a new administration, because either way, Trump will clean house. And so it really will be a new administration, or Biden will clean house. So either way, it's going to be new. What do you think is going to happen after January 21st with whomever is in there? How do you see the year unfolding? Is it that the financial elites are waiting to see what occurs? Or are we going to just see, as soon as January 21st comes, as soon as there's a solid cohesion in some administration, there's just checks signed, and then it's just like boom, 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 out the door, and there's a bunch of stimulus money coming? Or do you think that it's somewhere in the middle? What do you think happens in 2021 if you had to predict financially?
So I'll start by saying my crystal ball is broken. I don't know, but it's fun to speculate. So, some people pretend like they know exactly how things are going to unfold, and I'm not one of them. I don't know.
I know no ways it's going to unfold, and that's why I always ask this question. Everybody gets a little afraid. They're like, I don't know the answer. I'm like, right. I know you don't, but like, this is what I'm interested in the future. And I know you're super analytical, and you were in the Navy, and then you've been researching for 15 years. And so I'm just curious what you think.
Yeah. So, okay. So I think the end game is the same, regardless of who occupies the White House. The end game is the same from my perspective. I mean, someone I follow, Chris Martinson, says there's a difference between problems and predicaments. Problems have solutions. Predicaments have managed outcomes. And there is no solution to the problems we face, specifically the economic problems. This debt is mathematically impossible to repay. So that's the end game. It's the same from my perspective. Now, in the short term, if we want to have some fun speculating here, I think if Biden occupies the White House, I think precious metals will probably go up more and faster. I think probably this agenda towards the Great Reset, or whatever you want to call it, will probably be the timeline, and the pace will accelerate under a Biden administration. But I think, like I said, if Trump occupies the White House, I think we can expect probably more civil unrest. Probably things are chaotic, just in a different way, but equally chaotic. That's about the best answer I could give.
Hilarious. So yeah, we're definitely in a pickle. So when you say the end game is the same, what do you mean by that? And what is the end game in your estimation?
So I don't know specifics, but one thing we can all do, a lot of these people who direct, these globalist agendas, or whatever you want to call it, sometimes they're pretty candid. You just got to know where to look. So like, I like to go to the imf.org website, and you can read some of these websites or some of their posts. And even the World Economic Forum, you and I were just talking about this Klaus Schwab character who wrote a book called The Great Reset, COVID-19. So you can see kind of what their plans are. And, it involves probably universal basic income. They talk openly about this. They talk about a society where citizens don't own anything. Instead, you rent from the government. You don't own anything. I mean, who knows how that's going to work? I envision they're clear about that they want, government control of almost everything, to include the schools, how you educate your children, how you treat your health and your wellness of your body. They want you in their system. So I think that's where this is all headed, unfortunately.
Yeah, the funny thing is, by definition, that's what communism is that the government owns everything. That's what it is. That's what China is. And they pleasantly redefined it with more poetic words like, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. It's like, sounds like a North Korea commercial. Like if you've seen The Interview with Seth Rogen and James Franco, it's just like a funny movie about Kim Jong-un and stuff. They have the North Korean propaganda, and it's like that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you say you own nothing. And that will include, like, in theory, your body, your family, how you manage the affairs within the walls of your house. So, practical steps we can do. One thing I know you just relocated. I envy you. That's one thing we want to do is get in a place that's more rural. There are steps we can take to kind of mitigate this and prepare ourselves to be more resilient in the face of what's likely coming down the pike.
So, when precious metals comes into play, what do you think the catalyst is? Obviously, all of those things being so, they're kind of part of the philosophy behind why people invest in risk assets or safe haven assets. It's one of the philosophical reasons. A lot of people, maybe it's from a purely financial situation, totally, meaning just looking at the amount of debt that's in the system. But nonetheless, it is one of the avenues that someone can move to is precious metals. But what do you think are the catalysts right now? And what have your thoughts been about the last 4 months of metals have consolidated, Bitcoin started to move, and gold and silver have not? What do you think's going on in the metals, and what do you expect moving forward? I think that's a question that a lot of people probably have on this channel.
Sure. And we'll start by saying bull markets, there's a saying, bull markets will either wear you out or scare you out. So for the last 4 months now, we're in the wear you out phase. And by the very nature of a bull market is to shake loose as many retail participants as possible. That's why they call it a bull market. It tries to shake people loose, and it takes conviction to hang on, to ride that bull the whole, to capture the middle 80% of the move. No one's going to capture the buy at the bottom and sell at the exact top, but we want to capture that middle 80%. And it's hard. It's not easy to do. And we're in one of those times right now where a lot of weak hands are getting shaken off, and that's very healthy. And as the bull market progresses, fewer and fewer people are going to own the metal and own the shares. So I would encourage people, don't get shaken loose. If you have that that conviction. Remember the reasons that you invested in the first place. Now, as far as short-term catalysts, I think stimulus, they're going to do more stimulus. They have to. So that's probably the near-term catalyst to watch. And I think, markets look ahead. They're forward-looking. And I think the markets are starting to look ahead. And it looks to me like silver and gold are bottoming right here. That 21.80 from back in September, $21.80 on silver looks like a low to me. Could I be wrong? Sure. But I think downside is limited compared to the upside potential here. So I would just tell people, remember the reasons that you bought in the first place. Nothing has changed. The amount of money that they've printed in 2020 is going to pale in comparison to what they have to do in 2021. And then guess what? 2021 is going to pale in comparison to what they have to do in 2022. There is no alternative. The only solution that governments and central bankers have, they have two options. They can either default honestly and tell the public, hey, we don't have the funds for this. They're not going to choose that. There would be massive civil unrest. You tell grandma she's not going to get her Social Security check. They're not going to do that, or even a reduction in it. So the only other option is to inflate. And the amount of money that's going to need to be printed over this next couple of years is just staggering. It is staggering. And I cannot envision a scenario where precious metals don't benefit from that over the next year or two. I just can't think of a scenario where they don't.
Yeah, you're right. And the only thing I think is, and that's why I asked that, is because there's a little bit more of rubbing on the scab right now, I think, for all types of investors, because it seems like metals have bottomed kind of to me, but I feel like the ceiling is on top of them until there's greater political resolution. Because in certainty, everyone's in fight or flight, and most people just don't have the conviction for anything. They're just dominated by their fears. So I wonder if we still have until the 14th or around there, a little bit longer, until there's a little bit more resolution. But an important thing that I think for people in that time frame is, probably you couldn't have said it better when you just said that it either wears you out or it scares you out. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that and the nature of bull markets that you spoke of? Sure.
Yeah. So the wear you out phase is like, it just grinds sideways to maybe down for longer periods of time than most expect. And people say, I'm going to move on to the next thing. Maybe pot stocks, cannabis stocks start moving, and they say, I'm leaving silver, I'm going to that. So that's the wear you out phase. And the scare you out phase can be these really sharp spikes down. Like last Monday, we had gold dropped $100 in a couple hours on this supposed vaccine news. That's things like that scare a lot of people out. They say, forget this, especially, I don't want to categorize people, but say you're a retiree and you're more concerned with capital preservation than capital appreciation. And you've got your whole, big chunk of your nest egg in precious metals, and you see gold go down $100. That can scare you out and say, forget this, So that's the scare you out aspect.
And would you say we're in the scare you out right now, or in the wear you out right now?
I think the wear you out, because it's been the peak was August 12th, I believe. So we're 4 months. It's been 4 months since we've seen new highs, and it's been just drifting down for 4 months. And so that, I think that's worn a lot of people out. They're losing conviction. They're saying, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. I thought silver was supposed to go straight up every day. That's what people think. I used to think that when I was brand new. I learned so many lessons in 2011. I mean, from that 2008 to 2011, I thought I was going to be a millionaire by 2012, and just because it was just going up every day, and I didn't know how markets worked. So there's a lot of people who think that still. And then when it doesn't do what they expect, they say, I'm going to go find something else to invest in.
So wait a minute. So you were invested in 2011, and you saw your portfolio go way up and way back down. Is that
I watched it go up and watched it go down.
Holy shit.
Yeah, I remember the day I was overseas deployed. I was on my way back in Germany on April 29th, 2011, and it was midnight there or something like that. And some big breaking news story was about to come out, and they were about to announce the supposed death of bin Laden or whatever. And the second they announced that made that announcement, boom, silver dropped like $6. in like a minute.
Yeah.
And I had everything in it. And I didn't know. I'm thinking it just goes straight up, But you know what? That was so painful, but that taught me so many lessons. I feel like the last 15 years have prepared me for this exact moment that we're in. I'm prepared for this bull market. I've got a plan on how to handle it, and I wouldn't change a thing in hindsight.
All right, so that is hilarious. I'm a little younger, 2011 I was like 19. So I didn't even have $1 invested, and I didn't even know what was happening. So to me, it's hilarious. It's a true testament of, I think, one of the reasons that I like you and a lot. And what I said at the beginning, you're just like you could tell you're one of the good, very pure guys in this. And that has you have a lot to teach people, because even if they didn't go through 2011, if this is people's first time, it can be gnarly. It was really gnarly. I just basically put my personality, I just put a bunch of money in super fast in December, and then my portfolio is going way up. And then it just in March when everything sold off, and I freaked out. And David Morgan said, if I was your age, I wouldn't sell a thing. And he's like, it's going to go back up. And I didn't understand that, and then it went back up really fast. And that put me through precious metals puberty pretty quick. And I feel pretty relaxed about it now, but there are times when it's really challenging. And so, can you elaborate for myself and the viewer a little bit more on the other things that you learned? You said you feel like you're born for it now, it's like you had a rebirth, and you learned all these amazing things. And you said you're so prepared for it now. Can you elaborate? Let's spend a while talking about that. Can you elaborate on all these things you learned? And that's fantastic.
Yeah, and I'll mention, I feel like I am prepared for this very moment, but I'm also still learning. No one knows everything, so I'm.
Steve, I cannot believe that happened to you, dude. You're so tough-minded to stick through that and laugh about that and stay in the business for the second round. It's such a hero's journey story. I was laughing so hard, and I can let you know, I'm not laughing at you.
No, it's all good. It's funny, man. But I've got a message now. I don't want people to make the same mistakes. Now, I don't think this is going to be a replay of that bull market. We're not going to have. It's not going to be.
So let's talk about those mistakes. What were they?
Sure. So, here's some big advice. I think your portfolio, everyone's portfolio, should be centered around physical metals stored outside of the banking system as the foundation. Build your moat before your castle. Your physical is your defense. Mining stocks are your offense. And then I think a lot of people focus so much on individual stocks, and stock selection is important. But I think structuring your portfolio properly is even more important. And what I mean by that is, how much do you want to have allocated to the safer stocks like royalty companies? How much do you want to have in the mid tiers, and how much do you want to have in the speculations? Those speculations, those explorers and developers, those things have 10, 20, 30, 100 bagger potential. But it's going to be a wild ride, and most people are not prepared to handle that. So, you need to think about these things ahead of time. For example, in August of this past year, some of the penny stocks I track, and I own them. 20% of my portfolio is in speculative explorers. Some of those things were down over 50%. Now imagine you had every dime you own in that, and then boom, you're down 50%. That would be gut wrenching. Now I think you'll be fine if you stick with it long enough, but most people are not prepared for that. So structuring your portfolio properly is, I think, more important than individual stock selection. And then probably even more important than that is to have a personalized long-term exit strategy. And you need to recognize, everyone needs to know, you are not going to nail the top. Now, if you want to keep a little bit to try and nail the top, that's fine. But you need to have a plan where you sell into strength along the way. And that has to be customized according to your own personal needs and your personal objectives. It's going to be different for everyone, but you need to have one. And you can write it in pencil and you can change it, but you need to have a plan.
All right. That's good stuff. So I know we kind of talked about this before, but I guess in more detail, What does yours look like? Like just you, Steve, specifically, not financial advice, just Steve and Jake chilling. And I'm like, Steve, tell me your plan.
Sure. Yeah. So like the next steps for me are, I plan to de-risk my portfolio as the bull market matures. And what I mean by that is cycle profits from the more speculative mining stocks into the top tiers and the mid tiers and into physical. So if, as I'm hoping, and I'm very optimistic that we will see 50 plus silver probably in the first half of 2021. Now, I could be wrong on that, but I really think that's a very likely scenario. Now, if that were to happen, I'm going to put a trailing stop loss on a lot of my speculative mining stocks, as those things would go up exponential. And then as those stops trigger, I'll immediately cycle those profits into ETFs and royalty companies and things like that. So that's the next step of my personal exit strategy.
So you're saying that your portfolio right now, and let's say, we get a little bit less pandemonium and people feel settled enough to start spending again, and they do a new stimulus and we get silver's next leg up. And let's say on your more speculative portion or juniors, is whatever you want to call it, which is a majority of mine. You're saying you get a nice run right now, and let's say the bulk of it, because of the types of stocks that you own, the bulk of it goes up 300% on this next leg up. And you're saying once we start getting near a top of the next wave, that you'll slowly start selling out, rebuying with stops on everything to secure those profits, but not pulling yourself out in case they keep going up. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. I plan to maintain full exposure to the precious metals sector. It's just as the bull market matures, I'll be taking profits from the more speculative aspect of the portfolio and putting it into the more top tier.
What percentage of a stop? Let's say that hypothetically we get a 300% move, and I know at this point, I know the types of stuff that you own and type of stuff that I own. I think for a next wave, whether it's in the 40s or 50s, 300% is very realistic. And so let's say that happens. At what percentage would you do your stops at?
Yeah, so a rule of thumb for me on these explorers, and this may sound like a little bit, if you're new to the sector, like 500%. So once they're up 500%, which is fairly common in these, exploration stocks, once they're up 500%, I'm going to put a trailing stop. It depends. It's market driven on what percent I'm going to trail the stop. Maybe 10%, 10% trailing stop, and that's not on the whole position. That's just on a portion of the position, for perhaps a third or half. And once that triggers, I'll immediately go buy either physical metal or like the Sprott gold mining ETF or something like that, something to de-risk it. But I'm still in the sector.
So you'll move that into physical or Sprott or like a Franco-Nevada or like a new, like real safe things like that. And you'll slowly start moving your portfolio up the ladder into that way of less volatility, but things that should still have a really, really good run.
Exactly. And then as the gold silver ratio compresses, right now I'm heavily focused on junior silver miners. Junior silver miners is where I want to be. I'm not too interested in gold miners right now. But as that gold silver ratio compresses and normalizes, I'll gradually cycle profits from the silver mining stocks into gold mining stocks. Again, to de-risk the portfolio slightly. Interesting.
So I want to ask you about the gold to silver ratio and what you think. But first, is there anything else that was super interesting? And I'm sure for the people investing, it'll be great for them to think through those things that you're saying. So I'm sure they're loving that too. But is there anything else that comes to mind during that period of your life as you've now pulled your samurai sword out and you've been sharpening it for the last 10 years? Is there anything else that really comes to mind? You talked about your exit plan, writing that out. And we've also talked about some of the intricacies of what would happen exiting in the next wave and such like that. Is there anything else that really pops out from that? Because I know for one, I'm a very inexperienced investor. And And I'm sure that there's others as well, especially inexperienced to this sector. Like I put a chunk in and I was like, yeah. And then like 3 months later, like 80% of it was gone in March. And so is there anything else that comes to mind that you think is important, either if it's has to do with strategic investing and your exit plan, or more personal development, emotional things, or mindset things that have helped? Is there anything else that sticks to mind that's a cornerstone for Steve, the silver investor that's going to crush it here over the next few years?
Yeah, I think everyone should ask, have a why statement. What is your why for doing this? What's the end goal? Because, back in 2011, my goal was just to make as much money as possible. And what I was going to do with it, I don't know. I just have a bunch of money. Right now, my why is I want to relocate my family to a 10 plus acre farm. I want to live rural. I want to be 100% debt free and have time freedom to pursue the things that really matter in life. So that's my why, and that's my purpose statement. So that's what I want to use this portfolio for. And my exit strategy is all built around pursuing and achieving that goal. So have something like that. You can have your why can be whatever you want, but have a why statement and then develop an exit strategy to meet those goals and make it realistic.
So your why is essentially a clearly defined goal, or like Napoleon Hill talks about in Think and Grow Rich, a chief aim or a chief objective. And it's basically a one sentence that you defined, which is to make enough money to own a 10-acre sustainable ranch or farm property.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. And I want to be in a position to, to be a blessing to other people as these kind of things unfold. There's going to be a lot of people who are suffering through this. And, I'm not looking to, go buy Lambos and all that kind of stuff. If that's what people are into, that's cool. But I want to be in a position to help other people, but I want to take care of my family first.
We might have like hovercrafts by then. The Lambo might be a waste of money anyways, because like they probably already have the technology. You're like sitting with your Lambo, and then like they announce Elon Musk announces a hovercraft Lambo.
Right.
So when you sell out, your plan is to use that, trade that back into whatever form the currency is as it's necessary to exchange it into ranch and all those types of things. And then with your physical portion, is that I'm not selling that for financial independence. I'm achieving financial independence with my mining stocks and business and such. The metals will be there if I ever need them, but my intention is to never need them. Mm-hmm. And that's the plan. And then give them to your kids.
Yeah, that's the plan. I mean, I've been saving in these. I've been dollar cost averaging now for almost 15 years. Like every month, I just buy. So I don't want to say how. I will sell some of my physical. I'm not going to keep all of it, but I will keep enough that I plan to give to my children. I've got 3 children, and that they can give to their children and their children's children. That's the plan for some of it.
How old are your kids?
My boys are 6 and 8, and then my daughter is almost 2. She's 19 months.
How about your 8-year-old? Does he know much about what you do and silver and gold and what you think? Is he old enough yet to talk about that, or not really?
Yeah, it's so cool. I mean, he doesn't fully get it, but you put a silver coin in his hand and something happens. I teach him this is money. It's not based on debt. It's not it's not someone else's liability. It's so cool teaching the kids about this stuff because they're just sponges. I teach my 8-year-old a little bit about how to trade. I show him the stock charts, price and volume and stuff, and it's really fun. I want to prepare them to kind of, if you can learn about money early on, there's no reason you can't become financially independent, in your 20s or 30s. So I want to instill that in my children, all the things I never knew as a kid. Yeah,
that's super cool. I ask that because, you saw my baby before. Yeah. Now I think about it, I'm like, that's kind of how I envision, I guess, that it will be when my daughter's a little older. Mm-hmm. Interesting stuff. So you said you've been dollar cost averaging buying physical metals for 15 years. Is that what you said?
Yep.
Jeez Louise. And do you do, like, let's say whatever your income is, let's call your annual income X. And you know how they say in personal finance, like, save 10% of X. or whatever the number is, and everybody has a different number. 10%, they save 10% of their annual. Most people save negative 10%, but 10% or 15%. Do you take the totality of your savings portion of your budget into metals, or do you take the sum total of your savings and then a portion of your savings and it just does it automatic? Or I'd be curious. That's super interesting, and maybe there's some people that are stacking physical like that. Maybe they'd be curious to hear any pointers or how you do it, especially because you're obviously very strategic. Maybe that's like your Navy mind, huh? Is that what it is?
Well, I don't know. And by the way, it's Air Force.
Air Force. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries. So yeah, no, I'm probably not as strategic as you might think. I don't have like a well-written out plan. I just, in the beginning, when I was brand new, I just put as much as I possibly could. I mean, I was selling stuff around the house. When we were newly married without kids, I had these four-wheelers. I mean, I love those four-wheelers, but I learned this stuff. I'm like, I need more silver, so I sold the four-wheelers. Just getting as much as I can. So now I kind of try and be a little bit smarter. I play the gold silver ratio. Like right now at this ratio, I'm only buying silver. If the mining stocks are dirt cheap, maybe I'll buy a little bit less each month and put more into mining stocks. But yeah, it's automatic. I set the schedule and it just happens automatically, and I take delivery, or I keep it for storage.
Interesting. So let's talk about the gold silver ratio. I don't know much about it. Like, I'm the opposite. I'm like, I do not recommend anyone invest the way that I invest, which was basically have a business and just like press the buttons and buy, follow the right people and just pray to God. And like, I put a lot more than anyone probably should percentage wise. And so I'm not the right person to explain the details of so much intricacies of strategy like you have. And that's why I've asked all these questions, because one of the reasons I started this, like I told you, was for me to learn from really, people that are, really smart and really studying on a really deep level, the intricacies of investment. I guess I look more at macro. And so I haven't really followed. I know the gold silver ratio favors silver, and my investment portfolio, both in mining stocks and physical, represent that. I do, 90% of all of it is probably in silver, in mining stocks and physical for me. But I could tell you what the gold silver ratio is and all that jazz, but sure. I know you've deeply studied it. And so I'd love to know your thoughts on how that affects your investments, where you see it now and where you see that it may go for us. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and just understanding that gold-silver ratio, just understanding that one thing can really amplify your gains by a wide margin over the course of this bull market. So historically, the ratio is about 15-1. Right now, it's about 75-1. So in theory, if gold didn't even move up, silver would have to go up fivefold just to get to that historical ratio.
Which would put it at like 100 right now, just to go back to the historical average. Because if it's at 25 now, that would put it at 100, right? Yeah. Or no, that would put 125. I suck at math too.
And that's not a likely scenario, because they're both going to go up. Gold's going to go up. It's just that silver's going to go up more. But the 1980 bull market, that ratio peaked at 16-1, and then in 1933 the ratio is roughly 16-1 as well. So by the end of the bull market, I expect sub 20-1 gold silver ratio. In 2011, that ratio came down to 33-1. So let's just say we just go back to 33-1. Well, right now the ratio sits at 75-1. So silver should outperform gold by at least a factor of 2. So right there, you can amplify your gains by a factor of 2, just based on some historical precedent by focusing on silver now. And then as that ratio compresses, you can consider swapping silver for gold. That's what I plan to do. And I've got a schedule. Once the ratio gets below 50-1, I'll start swapping a little bit of silver for a little bit of gold, and just do that gradually as that ratio compresses.
What did you say it did in 2011?
33-1 was at the peak when silver was 50. Gold was 33 times that.
Do you know where it started at? When you started getting involved? Like, how our peak was like 128 or whatever in March. Do you know what around the peak of that cycle was?
I think around 70 or 80.
Got it. So it was less extreme to start with too.
Yes.
Got it.
Prior to this past March, when it went to 120 to 1, I believe that's like going back in all of recorded history. That's like there's never been a ratio like that. Typically 80 to 1 is like way out in the far extremes. So to go to 120 to 1, that was just like a 1 in a million thing. I don't think that's ever happened before.
Yeah, I wish I was less scared. I spent a lot of money, but I wish I would have spent everything I had in March, man, but it was scary. Like you said, it either scares you or wears you out. And it's very true. So then you plan to move everything over to physical gold.
Not necessarily everything, but transit. So the idea is to de-risk. Yeah. So I'll be cycling some of the profits into physical. Yeah. As the bull market progresses. So in March, you might think this is funny too. So I did it back in 2008. I sold the 4-wheelers. In March of this year, I'm like, what can I sell? I sold my dirt bikes again. And
you did?
The truck, yeah.
Oh, dude, you don't have any dirt bikes if you move out here? I don't like to say what city I live in, but
yeah, we'll be getting more dirt bikes soon. But
okay, so one thing that I know you're a silver buff, and obviously that's what I'm into as well. Mm-hmm. I'm really a silver investor. I'm hardly a gold investor, but one of the things when I think about silver from a macro so I own some Bitcoin, I own mining stocks, some gold ones, some silver ones. I own physical gold, I own physical silver. But one thing, who knows if it'll pay off or not, I can't say. But one of the things one of the things that attracts me to silver that it has from the supply and demand perspective that I think is greatly underestimated is the supply crunch from the demand surge because of the necessity for this 1984 Brave New World that we're moving into of a technocratic control world. The necessity of silver. I was listening to a talk recently by a guy that was breaking down how many grams of silver are in each plate of solar panel. I interviewed Keith Neumeyer from First Majestic that he said his quote, and I take Keith as an honest person. Yep. I think he's 100% telling the truth when he says he sat down with Samsung with the technology company Samsung, and they said that they were scared of silver being front run and not having available supply. And the mining output of both silver and gold has went down year over year, whereas the industrial demand for silver has greatly increased. I had David Morgan on recently, and I forget what he said. You might know, like 80% or 60% of the demand for silver is industrial right now. And I could be wrong on those numbers, like I said. And so people think of gold, and gold, of course, has a supply demand component as well, because, they aren't discovering that much new gold. And so that's went down as well. But I think silver has way more of a cooker to it because of the industrial component. And I think people underestimate that. And so I look at silver in a different lens than I look at, I own Bitcoin and I own gold and I own silver, and I own silver in all its different forms. But the investment component of the industrial demand is something that really interests me about silver, because you need it for everything. You need it for your iPhone. You need it for looking at your Vanguard account on your phone, or to look at your Bitcoin on your phone, or to light your house in the future if the socialists get control and they do a Green New Deal. Do you think that is that important to you?
Yes, absolutely. So I just like you, I think of gold for just capital preservation. I think it'll go up and it will increase my purchasing power, but I just want to preserve my purchasing power with gold. With silver, I see just tremendous upside, even with physical silver, for capital appreciation. And there is a supply crunch coming. And you could run the numbers change, but so the price right now is set on the commodities exchange, the COMEX. And there are at times roughly 100 claims of ownership for every ounce of silver that's traded on the COMEX. And you can just see that in on their data. The Commitment of Traders report comes out every week. You can see the eligible and registered categories. And if just a small fraction of the people stood for delivery, there's not enough silver there. There's just not enough. And they need it. Think of companies like Apple and Samsung, like you said. If they sniff out a supply shortage, they're going to just want to get it and stockpile it. So that's just a huge upside potential catalyst for silver outside of just the investment and monetary demand that is all but certain to come. So yeah, I mean, it's almost hard to overstate the bullish case for silver.
Yeah, people think these globalist companies are cutthroat now in their practice, in their consumer and marketing and advertising practices. Wait till they find out that they need to start buying the silver mines and you're not allowed to have anymore.
Right.
And I think that's greatly underestimated. And to me, I don't know when it'll happen. I guess it comes back to that Rick Rule. You know how Rick Rule says, like to buy an investment, that's a when, not an if. Mm-hmm. And I can rest assured in a when. It's almost like at that point, I do feel like I have to like surrender to like God. And I feel like God's involved in my investments as well, and like the higher order of the universe. What do you think about that? I when we were talking the other time, kind of in conclusion too, we were talking the other time and you mentioned, we were talking about some of the problems and you said, I said, well, what do you do about this, Steve? And you said, put my faith in God. As we talked before, I built everything I did more in spirituality and such. And so I'm just curious, what component, surrendering to something larger plays and affects you having the mental fortitude to move through these markets and be a leader and a teacher to a lot of people that are like sitting there pressing the refresh, waiting for silver chartists to, help calm their emotions. So what role does that play for you? If you don't mind me asking, if you don't want to talk about it, I guess I should have asked you that before I did.
No problem. I am more than happy to talk about my faith anytime. And, I put my faith above everything. And, I look at this is my perspective, and some people may agree, may not, and that's okay. But my perspective is that I'm a manager of the resources I've been entrusted to handle. So I want to be a wise steward. I want to be a wise manager. And, I believe God has entrusted me with this. He's put me here in this position for a reason. And I want to leverage this platform, whatever sphere of influence I have, to help people. And, trust that God's going to put me where he wants me. And, that gives me a level of peace. I'm not as worried about everything. I mean, I'm concerned, but I'm not worried. And there's a difference between worry and concern. Concern is things that you can do about it. If I can take action, I'm going to. But, worrying about things that I have no control over, having my faith in God helps me to not, worry about things that are out of my control.
Awesome. So for everybody listening to, obviously you could tell Steve's got a lot to teach and help, and there's nothing more valuable than somebody that knows exactly how to not make a mistake that doesn't allow you to keep your profits. He went through it. He went on that hero's journey and is obviously an incredibly knowledgeable person. And so for everyone that's still listening, just want to double encourage you to check the link out below for Steve's website. Anytime I promote any type of newsletters or anything, I just think everybody's doing an awesome job, especially someone like Steve. So it's not an affiliate. He has awesome stuff. And so the link's right there down below. I'll put his Twitter as well. So I recommend you go to his website and at least check out what he's offering on the free side.
Really appreciate that. Yeah. And so there's a free letter that and my goal with the free letter, I put it out every week, is to provide just tremendous value to people, not spam them and try and sell them all kinds of stuff. Just give them a lot of value. And there is a premium service, but I keep it really cheap. I mean, right now it's like $9 a month. And what I do, it's a fully transparent over the shoulder service with real-time alerts. So I show you my portfolio. Anytime I push the buy or the sell button, I send an alert out to the people. And it's not for advice, but it's just to show you what I'm doing. And hopefully that helps people to make wiser decisions in their own portfolios.
That's super cool. I didn't know you actually even do that every time you do it by yourself. That'll be really handy when we're moving in closer into a next wave up.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. So make sure you check that out right there down below. If you enjoyed this, please make sure you leave a comment down below. I always love talking to Steve and feel like a kindred friend with Steve. So it'd be awesome to have him on more often. There's so many more things I want to ask him, but I start whenever the interviews get really good. I'm like, I could make this a 7-hour long interview,
Yep.
but after the 60-minute mark, people just don't listen that much. I mean, even Joe Rogan popularized like the 60-minute plus things, and people like watching them. And this is probably a little longer than that, but maybe this is more like 75, but I feel like it'd be cooler to just come back on in a couple of weeks. We'll do an update on the market, and we'll plug your website again. And then we can talk about all the other macro events that are going on and all that good stuff. That sounds good to you.
Likewise, brother. Yeah, I'll come on anytime you'd have me.
All right, cool. So everyone, hit the like button on either side. Leave a comment down below and let us know if you want to have Steve back on again soon. Would be a great guy to have on regular. And thank you for listening.